The bird is at the feeder when you speak. Maybe you are talking to someone in the yard behind you. Maybe you are on the phone. Maybe you are only muttering to yourself about the weather. You do not raise your voice. You are not looking at the bird. But the bird's head turns, not away, toward. A small, precise angling of the skull. The kind of movement that looks deliberate.
So I told him
because it is
we wouldn't be
deliberate.
able to finish the
And for a
planting
half
until
second,
tomorrow,
the feeding
weather
stops
permitting.
entirely. You have seen this and moved past it 100 times, filed it under "birds are alert," the way you file away the rustle of leaves or the creak of a fence. But that is not what happened. The bird did not react to sound in general. It reacted to your voice specifically, the way you would turn at hearing your own name spoken across a crowded room. What happens inside a bird, in the second after it hears you speak, is not a startle response. It is closer to a memory being checked against a file. Welcome back to the bird's lore. This episode is about the exact thing that happens in a bird's brain in the instant it hears a human voice it already knows. If you have ever wondered why some birds barely glance up when you talk, and others turn like they were called, subscribe, because the difference is not personality, it is data. And by the end of this, you will understand what your voice has already become to the birds in your yard, whether you meant it to or not. Start with the mechanism, because the mechanism is the part most people get wrong. Birds are not simply detecting the presence of a human. Their auditory processing is built to isolate individual acoustic signatures, the same system that lets a chickadee pick one another chickadee's call out of a chorus of a dozen. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology have shown that several songbird species encode individual vocal identity down to fine variations in pitch, cadence, and harmonic structure. Differences a human ear barely registers, but a bird's auditory processing handles as a distinct signature, no different in principle from a fingerprint. Your voice has a shape. It has a pitch range, a rhythm, a set of pauses that are yours and almost no one else's. A bird that has spent enough time near you has, without any effort on its part, built a working model of that shape. When the shape repeats, something in the bird's threat assessment system checks it against the file and returns a result, known, not known. That check happens before the bird has consciously decided anything. It is closer to reflex than reasoning, which is exactly why it looks so immediate, so unthinking, when the head turns. This did not begin the day you noticed it. By the time a bird's head turns toward your voice, that response has already been built across dozens, sometimes hundreds of prior exposures. Each one a small transaction the bird was running, while you were doing something else entirely. Every time you have moved through your yard, talking, refilling a feeder, calling a dog, laughing with someone on the porch, a bird nearby was quietly cross-referencing that sound against outcome. Did anything bad happen while that voice was present? Did the voice precede food, or did it precede a hawk shadow crossing the grass? Work on habituation and human-associated learning out of the University of Exeter has documented that wild birds build these associative models remarkably fast, often within a handful of neutral or positive encounters, and that the models are durable once formed. You were not training the bird on purpose. You were narrating your own life at a volume the bird could hear, and the bird was taking notes. Not every turn of the head means the same thing, and this is where most people miss the finer signal entirely. A bird that turns and immediately resumes feeding has returned a fast, known, safe result. The check happened and closed in under a second. A bird that turns and freezes, holding position for 2 or 3 seconds before resuming, is running a slower check, often because the voice arrived at a slightly different pitch or emotional register than the file expects, raised, sharper, more clipped than usual. A bird that turns and moves away, even slightly, has not necessarily reclassified you as dangerous. It may simply be recalibrating distance, since your voice is a proximity cue as much as an identity cue, and a shift in volume reads to the bird as a shift in how close you actually are. Learning to read the difference between the fast turn and the slow turn is learning to read, in real time, how confident the bird's model of you actually is. Inside the bird, this is happening in structures most people never think about when they picture a songbird. Auditory information moves through the bird's inner ear into the auditory forebrain, where regions functionally comparable to parts of the mammalian auditory cortex handle the fine discrimination of pitch and pattern. Vocal recognition research using songbirds at Cornell Lab of Ornithology has mapped heightened neural response in these forebrain regions. Specifically, when a bird hears a familiar, individually distinct sound versus a generic or novel one, the brain is doing measurably more work and doing it faster for a voice it already has on file. This is not unique to alarm calls or to other birds. The same discriminative machinery a chickadee uses to recognize a mate's call from 20 feet away is repurposed, opportunistically, to recognize you. Birds did not evolve this system for humans. They evolved it for each other, and then pointed it at whatever consistent, information-rich sound kept showing up near reliable food and safety. You qualified. Once that file exists, it changes what the bird does before you have even entered the yard. A blue jay that has your voice on file may call an alert that differs subtly from its alert for an unfamiliar person, a difference other jays and, notably, other species listening in on the jay's call can use to recalibrate their own response. A Carolina wren that recognizes your cadence may resume singing within seconds of your voice passing by, where an unfamiliar voice of the same volume produces a much longer silence. Your voice, once filed, stops functioning as a generic disturbance and starts functioning as a specific variable the bird's decision-making can price in. This is the practical payoff of the whole system. It is not sentiment, it is efficiency. A bird that has to reassess every human voice from scratch every time is spending energy and attention it cannot afford to spend. A bird that can recognize you and move on with feeding is operating a shortcut, one built entirely out of accumulated, unglamorous exposure. What this means, in the end, is that the sound of you talking to your dog, arguing gently with someone on the phone, or humming while you fill a feeder has been quietly entered into evidence in the minds of birds that never once asked your permission to listen. There is no moment where a bird decides to learn your voice. There is only repetition, and a nervous system built to extract identity from repetition, whether or not anyone intended it. You did not train these birds. You simply kept being yourself, loudly enough, often enough, near enough, and their brains did the rest. The bird is still at the feeder. Your voice moved through the yard a few seconds ago, and it turned toward it, not out of alarm, but because somewhere in a small forebrain, a check ran and closed, almost instantly. Known, not known, and the answer came back known. The feeding resumed before you even noticed the pause. The chickadee that barely lifted its head has heard this exact voice, at this exact pitch, dozens of times before, near this exact feeder, with nothing bad ever following it. The blue jay a few branches up did not bother calling an alert, because the sound arriving was already priced into what it expected from this particular yard, at this particular hour. None of this required you to do anything except keep talking, keep moving through your own life, within earshot of birds who were listening more closely than you assumed. Your voice is not just noise to them anymore. It is a known quantity in a world built almost entirely out of unknowns.